Today we're going to be brewing the last of the Skyrim meads, Nord Mead. In the game it's a relatively common mead, being found anywhere you find loot really. I googled the official Elder Scrolls cookbook recipe, which calls for orange, ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, and cloves. But as usual we're making a reserve version of this recipe, so it kind of requires us to up the ante on the ingredients. To start, we'll add 7 pounds of this California wildflower honey to this 3-gallon fermentation vessel. Then using the same water we're going to use to ferment, we'll wash out the remaining honey in the bottles and dump it into the vessel. Those bees work hard for our honey and we're not wasting a single drop. And yes, I'm using water bottles because I forgot to get a gallon jug of water at the store. And after giving everything a nice thorough mix down, we can add our oranges. But not just any orange, my personal favorite, blood orange, which will hopefully give this mead a nice dark amber color. In addition to the blood orange, we'll be adding some Tangelos, which are just a cross between grapefruit and tangerines, and 1 lovely large lemon. Now, just like the recipe states, we're going to avoid putting any of the fruit rinds in the mead. I've made citrus mead in the past, and it'll make it real bitter. The recipe calls for 1 orange per half gallon, and since we're doing 3 gallons, I'm adding 6 oranges, 3 Tangelos, and 1 lemon. The recipe also calls for 1 inch of ginger, but I don't exactly know what 1 inch looks like, so I'm doing the best I can here. We'll hold off putting the rest of the ingredients until after fermentation. We'll want to be tasting the mead daily when we add stuff like cinnamon and cloves. But as usual, we'll be adding some yeast nutrients and pectic enzyme to clear up the haziness. I'm debating on leaving this mead dry after it's done fermenting. All the Skyrim meads I've done thus far have been very sweet. I want to shake things up, so to speak. Next, we're going to rehydrate our yeast. A nice 20-minute bath in some warm water should wake them up. Now, I'm using Lalvin V1116 yeast because it works really well with kind of exotic fruits. But feel free to use whatever yeast you want, as long as it's made for fermentation purposes. Then we'll fill up a bubbler and get a graduated cylinder ready so we can do a gravity reading, which measures the sugar content in the brew so we can determine how much alcohol will be produced. And if the yeast have a comfortable environment and convert all the sugar into alcohol, this mead has the potential to get up to 13.5%. All in all, this process should take about a little over 2 months. 1 month for fermentation and another month for back sweetening before we age in some bottles. And I'm happy to report that the yeast were very pleased with their environment because they immediately started fermenting later on that day. Be sure to follow to see the entire process. Welcome back, everyone. It's been about a month since we pitched this Nord Reserve mead from Elder Scrolls Skyrim. And after doing a gravity reading to confirm all the sugar has been fermented, it's time to stabilize this mead. We'll add some metabisulfate, some potassium sorbate, and then wait 24 hours before tasting the mead. And off the bat, I noticed the citrus notes were very prevalent, with just a hint of heat from the ginger on the aftertaste. Now, in addition to the spices shown in the cookbook, I'm going to add a few ingredients of my own to make this mead just a little better, starting with lemon drop hops, cloves, star anise, Cassia Bark cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon, and cardamom. I want this mead to be just a touch bitter with some earthy notes, kind of like an IPA. I figured the Nords in Skyrim would be making mead from whatever they found in the environment they lived in, usually somewhere cold. After adding our ingredients to a brew bag and tying it off, we can add some oak chips to give the mead a little bit of tannin. The mead makers of Skyrim no doubt stored their brews inside of barrels, so this is befitting. We're going to want to be tasting this mead daily because things like cinnamon and cloves and star anise have a habit of really overpowering your mead and giving it a really spicy and sometimes licoricey flavor. We're also going to leave this mead dry for the time being. Eventually, I'd like to sweeten it with some orange blossom honey. So stay tuned if you'd like to see the full results. Now that we let our Nord Reserve mead from Skyrim age in some spices and some oak for a couple of weeks, it's time to siphon it into some new vessels and sweeten it with some honey. Now, normally I'd use the little siphon provided on the brewing vessel, but this mead got so full of leads and dead yeast and used up citrus and ginger slices that it became clogged, so I actually had to siphon the mead directly out into some carboys. Now, since I pitched about 3 gallons worth of mead when we started, I'm expecting just a little over 2 gallons, maybe 2.5 gallons altogether. The trick here is to avoid that bottom layer of yeast and sediment. Once you get it all stirred up, it makes your finished wine a little cloudier than you'd probably want it. And to avoid getting any cloudy mead, I think I'm going to have to sacrifice that half gallon I was talking about. But certainly a worthy sacrifice in the pursuit of getting wine with good clarity. After cleaning out and resanitizing the main vessel, we're going to re-siphon the mead back into it and add our honey. And if you know me, you already know what honey I'm using. Some orange-infused honey from Hucklebee Farms. Now, at first, I wanted this mead to be dry, but this honey has the perfect orange flavor to reintroduce some citrus notes back into this dry mead. Now, here's a little trick I learned working at the meadery. I'm mixing in the honey as the mead is being siphoned in. That way, I don't have a whole layer of unused honey sitting at the bottom. Now, after we siphon in the rest of the mead and mix in the honey, We're going to give it a little taste test to know where we're at, using the now unclogged spigot. Now, at first I was nervous because the nose gave a lot of clove flavor, which I'm sure, as you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of. But to my surprise, the mead was far less bitter than when I first tasted it. The orange-infused honey gave some very pleasant notes, tasting like some sort of orange Christmas candy. Now all we have to do is let it age for a couple more weeks before we get to the bottling stage. Make sure to like and follow to see. Now that we've given our Nord Reserve mead plenty of time to clear up and age, it's time to bottle it. And as I've done in the past for all of my Skyrim meads, I'm using the bottles with the matte black finish. Although I wouldn't recommend using them. They look pretty cool, but they're not very efficient, as you can't really see when the mead is about to fill up until the last second. Then using Star San as lubricant, we're going to plunge these corks into the necks of the bottles with a hand crank. Oh, that reminds me. Always store your wine and mead bottles on their sides. That way the corks always have a little bit of wine keeping them moist, which keeps them from cracking over time. After we slap on some seals and labels, we can put the bottles away to age for a couple of years. And all in all, I was very pleased in how this mead turned out. Rich and complex, with a lot of bitter and citrus notes. But guys, this was my fourth and final mead from the Elder Scrolls Skyrim game. This series was a lot of fun, and I hope to do more like it in the future.